Bene, cari colleghi, benvenuti per questo incontro molto atteso, vedo dal numero delle persone qui presenti, dato l'argomento che è certo un argomento che attira interesse e curiosità. Allora abbiamo con noi il dottor René Brulart, che bene conosciamo, di presenza e di fama, e che ci presenta in qualità di direttore dell'AIF il secondo rapporto annuale dell'Autorità di Informazione Finanziaria, quello per l'anno trascorso 2013. Se vi ricordate, più o meno a questo punto dell'anno, un anno fa, avevamo avuto la presentazione del primo rapporto annuale, un bel fascicolo a stampa che vi era stato distribuito, e anche quest'anno all'uscita troverete la copia del rapporto integrale a stampa a disposizione all'uscita, mentre adesso il dottor Brulart ce lo presenta con un intervento e avete nel bollettino che vi viene distribuito in inglese e in italiano un comunicato che è una sintesi, penso fedele perché è stato redatto dallo stesso autore del commento, di quello che adesso il dottore Brulart ci dirà. Dopo la presentazione naturalmente avremo tempo per fare delle domande. Non sono previste però interviste singole alla fine, quindi le domande si fanno nella sala e poi dopo si chiude la nostra riunione ad ora appropriata. Dato che sono argomenti di carattere tecnico su cui è bene essere anche abbastanza precisi, il dottor Brulart preferisce parlare normalmente in inglese, anche se però capisce molto bene l'italiano e può anche esprimersi in italiano, quindi poi per le domande muovetevi liberamente, ma la sua espressione, diciamo, per il suo intervento è inglese, come pure l'originale della sintesi che avete è quella inglese. Grazie di essere qui per la gioia dei nostri colleghi e buon lavoro. A lei la parola, dottor Brulart.
Grazie, padre Lombardi. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to welcome you here and to present to you the annual report of the Autorità di Informazione Finanziaria 2013 to you all here. For the ones that have been here last year, you might recall that we were saying this is the beginning. It's not yet a tradition, it's the second one. I hope many others annual reports are going to follow, but I think it's important to report back to the public on the work we have carried out. If you look back to 2013, it has been, I would say, a challenging year, but with really substantial improvements, with positive developments, and I'm happy to walk you through the developments and the achievements we have made to further strengthening a well-functioning and sustainable system here within the Holy See to fight money laundering and terrorism financing. Let me walk you through that in brief, and then, as Father Lombardi indicated, I'm happy to receive your questions and maybe also to precise some of the issues we have here. Let me start with the legal framework, which has kind of seen major changes in 2013 as such. If you go back some months, we had in August 2013, we had the decree number 11, and then some months later, on October, 8th of October 13, the implementation of the law 18, which is nowadays the new anti-money laundering law here in the Holy See. It constitutes a state-of-the-art legislation fully in line with international standards, which also has been approved fully and confirmed by Moneywall in December 2013. What is important here to say is, if you look into the new AML-CFT legislation or into this new kind of legal framework, we have kind of two pillars here. It's not only, let's say, the work at the financial intelligence unit, also with the relevant obligations and responsibilities, but what also happened with the law number 18, we introduced the function of prudential supervision, something which also has been requested by Moneyval and which we have kind of carefully elaborated and introduced. Now, once you have kind of a new full-fledged legal framework with new competencies, with a new mandate, with also new power for the authority, one of the consequences of that is that it has a direct impact on the institutional framework, which means that kind of the powers and competencies, but also the responsibilities of AIF had in that regard been to be addressed, and that is what happened with the two motu proprios in August last year, and then especially in November of 2013. If you go a little bit more into the details on the motu proprio of August 8th, where the first time ever the kind of the function of AIF as prudential supervision has been introduced, and also the work and the current mandate of AIF has been confirmed. So this was kind of, let's say, the birth of the new AIF with two pillars, one pillar as financial intelligence unit and the other pillar as supervisor and regulator. What happened then, we had the motu proprio dated November 15th, where the new statute of the AIF has been introduced, where clear competencies and responsibilities of the organs of AIF have been introduced, and also as a direct consequence of the law number 18, also the work of the AIF as a financial intelligence unit and as supervisor and regulator has been determined. One other consequence of this new broadening of the mandate and of this new AIF is linked to staff. As you can imagine, especially with a new pillar, also as prudential supervisor, this is one of the key issues. We're not just kind of putting letters on a paper, we also have to work. And what you see later on regarding in the statistics, there is quite some work to do. So the point there is staff quality and quantity-wise, we are currently kind of elaborating, and I hope during summer that we will have a full-fledged authority in that regard. If you go a little bit into the operational activities as such, if you recall the statistics of 2011 and then 2012, especially regarding the so-called suspicious transaction reports or the so-called segnalazioni, once you're going to open the annual report or what you have in front of you on the press release, you see a significant increase. Before I'm going into the figures and trying to explain a little bit, or will explain a little bit how this happened, let me just kind of state here clearly and explain what is meant by suspicious transaction report. So suspicious transaction report or a segnalazione is not kind of evidence that something went wrong or there was kind of, let's say, a money laundering activity or any kind of illicit behavior. We're talking here about a certain suspicion. Yeah, we're talking here about certain indicators a financial institution has that, for example, a transaction is not fully in line with the profile, or certain information are missing, or the clients are not willing to bring forward background information on certain transactions. So we are talking here about a suspicion, and it's then the work of a financial intelligence unit, or here within the Holy See, it's the work of AIF, to analyze if this kind of suspicion is justified. So in other words, to say if there is enough meat on the bone to forward it to the promoter of justice for the opening of a penal investigation, or if this is going to remain in our database and potentially never, potentially somehow, somewhere in the future, this case is going to be opened again. So this is a very important distinction. We are not talking here about penal investigations. When you look into the figures, we are looking here about, I would call it, the homework the financial institutions and the authorities have made to, in a much more careful way, looking into potential abuse of financial activities within the Holy See. So if you look into the figures, in 2011 we had 1, in 2012 we had 6, in 2013 we had 202 so-called suspicious transaction reports or segnalazioni. So what does that mean? Does that mean that we have much more, let's say, abusive or illicit activities within the Holy See? No, not at all. What it means is that the system, the reporting system, starts to work or works. So in other words, there is much more awareness of potential, let's say, activities. And you see it then in the figure regarding dissemination to the promoter of justice, where we had 5 cases we were forwarding to the promoter of justice in 2013. So it's really kind of an enhanced awareness of the involved financial institutions and authorities in that regard. They're kind of, I would say, this is one explanation. The other explanation is that in a way or another, it's also linked to the remediation process within the IOR. So as you can imagine, once you look in a much more detailed way into the client relationship, where you start kind of to elaborate on the profiles there, it's much easier then that you kind of file a suspicious transaction report. And we have put there the threshold quite low regarding the filing to go this process in a proper and also substantial way through it. So these are kind of the 2 reasons to these 2 figures. If you're going to have this height of figures in the future, well, I don't have the magic ball in front of me. It's difficult to say, but based on experience, I would say that once the remediation process within the IOR is going to be over, it's going to be done, I assume, or I would expect, that this figure is going to be ultimately much, much lower. You will find also in the annual report a link to, or statistics, to the so-called transfrontalieri, to the kind of cash transaction reports. I have said that last year, and I repeat that this year again. This is one of the issues which is important for us to get an understanding the movements of the cash in and out of the Vatican City. You will see it in the statistics. There is quite a bit of lowering in the figures. There are lower figures, there are decreasing figures, they are declining. This is on the one hand linked to the, let's say, more tentative work of the involved authorities, but I think it's in a way or another, it's also linked to the system which works. We are quite an island here, and as you can imagine, doing all this kind of work, it's important to have international cooperation, which is of key importance, and therefore to become member to the Egmont Group, the worldwide or global association or international organization of so-called financial intelligence units, where there are currently 139 countries member to it. Last July has been a milestone for the Holy See. So this was one of the, I think, one of the big achievements after, I would say, quite an in-depth and objective application procedure to become member to the Egmont Group and to be considered as a fully equivalent authority in that regard. It's not only the Egmont Group or being member there, it's mainly also the bilateral cooperation. And if you look into the report, we have signed several so-called memorandum of understanding to ensure bilateral cooperation. We did it with Spain, we did it with Belgium, we did it with Germany, the Netherlands, Slovenia. We did it also with Italy, and we did it also with the United States. And lately we had followed others with Australia, Cyprus, and we will, over the next weeks, sign many more of so-called memorandum of understandings, which I think are absolutely important for us, that we are put in a position to do our analytic work. Most of the cases, or almost all of the cases, they do have an international context, so we have to be in a position to cooperate with other financial intelligence units or with other competent authorities. Now, being member to the Egmont Group or doing this kind of bilateral cooperation, this is not a window dressing exercise. And let me put that very clearly. This is of clear importance at our end. This is a strong commitment of the Holy See, and it's ultimately a responsibility for the Holy See to be part to such kind of networks and to interact and to play its role and to help on a global level to fight these evils of money laundering and terrorism financing. And that's how we are living it. If you look into the statistics in the report, we have, I think in 2004, there was bilateral cooperation in 4 cases. In 2013, we had in more than 80 cases, we were cooperating with other authorities, with other competent authorities, and not only with one country, we were cooperating with several countries. Let me move quickly to, since I think there are also from you all where you're writing about it extensively, about the whole Moneywall process. Let me quickly summarize that, going back to summer 2012, where the first ever mutual evaluation report of the Holy See has been adopted by the plenary with certain recommendations. The Holy See, neither that time nor today, has been put in a monitoring procedure or in a so-called monitoring procedure. However, there were recommendations in the report which we have addressed with the new law, and then where we had the discussion in December 2013 in Strasbourg, where the progress report had been fully adopted by the plenary of Moneywall. So in that regard, this round of Moneywall for the Vatican is closed in a positive and successful way. We also had quite some discussions internally, but also in the media, when and how and where it's going to happen, the so-called first on-site inspection of the IOR. It happened. Okay, so when we were discussing with Moneywall, we always said that we would do it either by the end of 2013 or early 2014. So the inspection has been carried out in the first trimester of this year. And now, what is it about? Okay, so to avoid any kind of misunderstandings, we have the new anti-money laundering law number 18, which has been put in place on October 8th. So it's a relatively short period to do all kind of the implementation work, also within the institute, but also for, let's say, other authorities. So what we were doing, we launched this inspection in January of this year. what is this inspection about? It's about checking and reviewing if the institute is in line with the new law 18. So which means, are the proper policies in place? Are the proper procedures in place? Are the proper measures implemented to tackle, for example, certain activities which are linked then into the filing of suspicious transaction reports, etc. Now, how have we done that? So we put it somehow in kind of 3 phases, which is, and this is kind of a completely ordinary procedure, and also this type of inspection we will do again in the next years. This is a normal process here in the Vatican, a normal process in Italy, a normal process in Germany or in the US, that on a regular basis the financial institutions are kind of inspected by their supervisor to see if the ordinary procedures have been implemented. So if you look into the process, how we have carried that out, we put it more or less into kind of 3 phases. First phase was somehow offsite, requesting, where the IOR received a nice questionnaire, request for all different documentation, etc. Based on that, then we kind of prepared the on-site inspection as such, where we were in the institute for several weeks, and then after that you put that all into a report. Once you have put that all in a report, what you're doing, you counter-check with the law, is kind of the behavior in line, is it not in line, are there certain kind of issues which have to be strengthened, which have to be adapted, etc. And on this basis then you do develop, I will call it an action plan, which you will discuss then with the management of the relevant financial institution, and that is what we will do in the next days, in the next very few weeks, where we work together there to take, let's say, kind of certain corrective measures to have kind of a full implementation of law number 18 in the IOR. This is kind of the process we were working on over the last months, which will now continue a little bit, and then based on this action plan, we will go into the whole kind of implementation period where something has to be done or where not. Now, what I can say is that the IOR was coming from quite a long way. They have, in the last 12 months, they have undertaken significant efforts in looking into first the decree number 11, but then also into the new law number 18. It's tough work. They're doing their job, and they have made substantial progress in that regard. And here I see it also as the responsibility of the authority, which is kind of supervising the IOR, that certain guidance is given, that we do that hand in hand, and that's also the meaning of this action plan. Thank you.
Bene, allora thank you, mille grazie per questo